The State of Logistics report measures the supply chain for the U.S. economy in several different pieces. It measures the cost having to do with inventory and managing inventory. And then the largest piece of it is the actual freight piece. And that's the physical conveyance of the goods. That's usually what people think of when you say supply chain or freight or logistics. They think of the train or the plane or the boat or the truck. And for the economy as a whole, the most important thing is that we don't have any breakdowns in any one sector. By breakdowns, I mean things like having union contracts expire and strikes, having things like first drought and then the floods that we're having that are impacting the flows on the Mississippi River for the inland waterway. For the trucking industry, we're talking about the condition of the roads. And for the railroad industry, we're talking about the condition of the rails and the availability of cars. And then how do we integrate all of those things to work together as one package? One of the interesting things I think in this year's report is we have found for the second year in a row, there really hasn't been a lot of room for carriers, particularly truck carriers and rail carriers, to raise their rates to match their increases in costs, because we've got labor rates that are going up. A lot of that has to do with a lot of freight transportation labor is unionized, and we just had a whole series of contracts that were renegotiated and have pretty decent increases in them over the next 5 years. The cost of fuel, while the growth in the cost of fuel has slowed down, it's growing all the same. So we've got fuel costs that are continuing to increase. Then we have a really big chunk of costs that I think we could call regulatory costs that are having more and more impact on the industry. We had the new CSA regulations that the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration put into place in 2010, which really didn't change rules. It changed how they were enforcing the rules, and it made the rules much stricter, and that's had an impact of reducing productivity in the industry, as well as increasing maintenance costs, because there's a lot more chance that you will get caught in a roadside inspection, and one black eye from a bad roadside inspection has a lot of repercussions, because you have an overall score, and we have shippers that are determining what carriers they're using based on their scores. And then we have probably the most significant thing coming into effect on July 1st of this year, which is the new hours of service rules for the trucking industry. And it's effectively, with the new start piece of it by itself, removing about 17% of the productivity of an average driver for their work week. And translate that all the way through, it's going to be anywhere from I've heard estimates anywhere from 2 to 10% hit on productivity for the entire industry. So if you do the math, it means we need about 100,000 more drivers on top of we already have a shortage of 30,000 drivers and not enough qualified people willing to take the job. So capacity for the conveyances, for the actual modes that move the freight, has an extremely big impact on whether or not things are on the shelf, but also the cost of those. Because when you think about that gallon of milk you just bought, you've got the farmer's cost in it, you've got the packaging cost in it, but a pretty good piece of that is generally your transportation cost. And so the lower you can get the transportation cost as a total cost of the good, it keeps inflation down. And we've been seeing inflation creep up. The recession had a very, very dramatic impact on the freight transportation portion of the industry. The impact that it had was to cause a giant contraction in the industry. We had the trucking part of the industry that between bankruptcies and intentional reductions to get that more in line with what was going on in the economy, we lost about 25 to 30% of the actual capacity. And that isn't trucks that are sitting somewhere ready to be put the key in and turn it back on. We sold those in the export market. We went into the recession earlier than a lot of the rest of the world, and so there was a good market for our used trucks. So that right now a used truck, you pay almost as much for a good used truck that you really want to think hard about whether you want to buy that or go buy a new one that has the better fuel economy and the other things that'll help you save costs down the road. But the cost of those has been bid up. But the reduction in capacity has put us at a point where we're actually in danger of, if the economy did suddenly ignite tomorrow, we would have catastrophic failures. The trucking industry right now is probably the most precarious piece. They are at this delicate balance, and I'm beginning to feel a little bit like Chicken Little saying the sky is falling, you know, we're going to have this capacity problem, but the truth of the matter is we haven't grown volume enough and we haven't had that regulatory impact that's now going to suck productivity out, that's going to tip it.